since he took office, 86,000 more Canadians are unemployed, and we have the second highest unemployment in the G7. This is all the result of out-of-control government spending and taxes. Every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians, and now the Parliamentary Budget Officer rates his deficit, says, quote, very alarming, stupefying, shocking, unsustainable. If you don't change, this is done. Something is going to break. We are at the edge of a cliff. Those are the words of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. When will he stop his out-of-control spending? When he's over the edge of the cliff?
In the heart of Ottawa, under the blinding lights of Canada's House of Commons, an extraordinary political clash unfolded. The kind of clash that doesn't just fill the news cycle, it rewrites it. On one side, Mark Carney, the newly seated Prime Minister, a man whose reputation was built on decades in global finance, calm authority, and an image of intellectual discipline. On the other, Pierre Poilievre, the relentless Conservative leader, razor-sharp in his rhetoric, famous for turning every question period into an arena of combat. But this time, the gloves didn't just come off, they were thrown across the floor. The session began like any other. The Speaker called order, MPs shuffled their papers, and television cameras clicked on. Canadians watching at home probably expected the usual, talking points, rehearsed answers, the theatre of politics. But what they got was different. What they got was raw, unscripted political warfare. Poilievre rose first, his voice steady but already loaded with venom. He locked his eyes on Carney, and his words cut through the chamber like knives. Mr. Prime Minister, he began, your government has spent recklessly, you've piled debt on Canadians, and what do we have to show for it? Tariffs that punish our industries, inflation that punishes families, and concessions, yes, concessions, to Donald Trump, with nothing in return. The Conservative benches erupted in approval, pounding their desks in thunderous rhythm. Poilievre didn't pause. He knew momentum was everything. He pressed harder, his tone almost mocking. While Canadians are tightening their belts, you, Prime Minister, are signing away our leverage. President Trump asks and you bend. You give up tariffs. You give up trade tools. And what do we get? Nothing but weakness. That's your legacy. The chamber buzzed. This wasn't just criticism, it was an open attempt to brand Carney as a weak leader, incapable of standing up to Washington. And for a split second it worked. Carney sat in silence, gripping his papers. The cameras zoomed in on his face, his jaw tight, his eyes narrow. Then he rose. The room stilled. Even those on the Conservative side leaned forward, sensing something different. This wasn't going to be a dry, technocratic reply. Carney slammed his papers on the desk and launched back, not with statistics, not with bureaucratic explanations, but with fire. Canadians deserve more than cheap theatrics, he thundered, his voice echoing across the chamber. What the member opposite offers is not leadership, it is slogans. Empty, hollow slogans designed to divide, not to solve. Gasps rippled through the benches. Carney wasn't supposed to lose his composure. His reputation was calm, collected, professorial. But this was not the Carney Canadians had seen before. This was a Carney willing to raise his voice, willing to fight. He jabbed a finger toward Poilievre. You stand here, week after week, shouting about debt, shouting about tariffs, shouting about concessions. But let me ask you, leader of the opposition, what is your plan? What is your solution? Canadians deserve answers, not noise. The Liberal benches exploded into applause, drowning out the Conservatives' heckling. Carney's voice climbed higher, every word more pointed than the last. When the United States threatened to collapse our industries with tariffs, this government stepped up. We defended Canadian workers. We preserved access to markets. We negotiated, we stood firm. Did we make compromises? Yes. Because leadership requires decisions, not slogans. And what would you have done, Mr. Poilievre? You've never faced a negotiation in your life. That last line hit like a hammer. Even some Conservatives shifted uncomfortably as the jab landed. But Poilievre smirked, he knew Carney had raised the stakes, and he wasn't about to let go. "Mr. Speaker," Poilievre shot back instantly, "the Prime Minister says leadership requires compromise. But all he has ever done is surrender. Surrender to Trump, surrender to debt, surrender to inflation. That's not leadership, that's weakness. And Canadians see it." The House was in chaos. MPs shouted over each other, the Speaker pounded his gavel for order, and cameras captured the storm of faces: anger, applause, mockery, outrage. But Carney wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice rising, nearly shouting over the din. "Weakness is promising the moon and delivering nothing. Weakness is tearing down without building up. If you think yelling slogans makes you strong, Mr. Poilievre, you are mistaken. Leadership means standing in the arena, taking the blows, and still fighting for Canadians." The tension was electric. It wasn't just a debate, it was a duel for legitimacy, a contest over who truly embodied strength in leadership. Outside Parliament, social media exploded. Clips of Carney's outburst began spreading instantly. On Twitter, hashtags like #Carney vs. Poilievre and #House Showdown trended within minutes. Some praised Carney for finally showing passion. Others accused him of losing control, of revealing cracks in his armor. And in the middle of it all, Canadians couldn't look away. This was politics stripped of polish, two men fighting not just for power, but for the very image of leadership itself. The chamber had erupted into chaos. The Speaker's gavel thundered, but neither side was willing to yield. The moment had transformed from question period into a political cage match, and millions of Canadians were glued to their screens. Mark Carney, once thought of as the calm, unflappable statesman, now stood visibly animated, his voice carrying across the green benches with unexpected force. The normally reserved technocrat was gone. This was a man defending his legitimacy with fire in his veins. Pierre Poilievre, however, lived for this. He thrived on chaos, on quick jabs and relentless pressure. He knew that if he kept hammering, kept needling, he could paint Carney as rattled, cornered. And so he doubled down. "Mr. Speaker," Poilievre shouted, his voice cutting through the din, "Canadians don't want lectures from a banker who spent his life in ivory towers in London and New York. They don't want your globalist excuses. They want relief from the inflation you created, from the spending spree you unleashed. And they certainly don't want a prime minister who bows every time Donald Trump snaps his fingers." The Conservative benches roared, desks thumping like drums in battle. Carney shot back instantly, not even waiting for the applause to die down. His voice thundered, his finger jabbing at Poilievre. "You talk about global experience as if it's a weakness. Let me remind you, leader of the opposition, experience is what saved this country from collapse when global markets turned on us. Experience is what gives Canada a voice at the table, instead of being dismissed like amateurs shouting from the sidelines."
Mr. Speaker, there's a little thing called cause and effect. And the cause that the Leader of the Opposition is missing is the U.S. tariffs. The U.S. tariffs that are hitting steel, the U.S. tariffs that are hitting lumber, the U.S. tariffs that are hitting our auto sector. That's why we need to build this country strong. That's why we're getting spending under control. That's why we're going to spend less to invest more. I believe in this country, Mr. Speaker. Come join us.
The chamber was on fire. Carney's Liberals clapped and shouted in approval, while Poilievre's Conservatives jeered and heckled. The Speaker barked for order, but order had long left the room. And then came the moment that would define the clash. Poilievre leaned forward, his tone dripping with contempt. "Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister calls me a man of slogans. But here is one truth he cannot escape. Under his leadership, Canadians are poorer, weaker, and more divided. That is his real record." The blow was sharp, brutal, and effective. For a split second, the chamber went quiet. Even Carney's allies felt the sting of that line. But Carney didn't flinch. Instead, he erupted. "Poorer, weaker, and divided," he yelled, his voice shaking the rafters. "Canadians are stronger because we face crises head-on. Canadians are united because we refuse to let fear drive us apart. And as for you, Mr. Poilievre, your record is a list of attacks, insults, and empty promises. You offer no vision, no solutions, just a vision. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, but the passion electrified the chamber. Liberals pounded their desks like war drums. Even some crossbench MPs leaned forward, astonished by Carney's force. Outside Parliament, the clash was already dominating headlines. CBC ran banners. Carney explodes at Poilievre in heated showdown. CTV looped clips of Carney pointing, shouting, his face red with passion. On social media, the split was vicious. Supporters praised him for finally showing teeth, while critics mocked him as losing his cool. And Poilievre knew exactly how to spin it. Minutes after the exchange, his team blasted out a clip with the caption, "Carney unhinged." When pressed on his failures, he yells, "Canadians deserve calm leadership, not tantrums." It racked up hundreds of thousands of views within hours. But Carney's Liberals weren't sitting back either. They clipped his fiery line. Leadership means standing in the arena, taking the blows, and still fighting for Canadians. It went viral too, shared as proof that Carney wasn't just a banker in a suit, but a fighter. In living rooms across the country, families argued over dinner tables. Was Carney right to shout back? Was Poilievre exposing the truth? Was this passion, or was it panic? The country was polarized, and the clash in Parliament had turned into a battle for the national narrative. Analysts weighed in on talk shows that night. On one panel, a commentator smirked. Carney yelling in Parliament? That's not strength, that's inexperience. He played right into Poilievre's hands. Another countered, no, you're missing the point. Canadians have been waiting to see if Carney can fight. And tonight they saw it. This could change everything. The fight wasn't just about tariffs, spending, or Trump anymore. It was about image. Poilievre wanted to brand Carney as weak. Carney wanted to show Canadians he could stand in the fire and roar back. And the truth was, both men had gotten exactly what they wanted, a spectacle that no Canadian could ignore. But neither realized, as the sun set on Ottawa that night, that this clash was only the beginning. The fallout would reshape the weeks ahead. Campaign strategies would shift, polls would swing, and the Canadian public would be dragged deeper into a political war unlike anything in recent memory.
Mr. Speaker, I know that sometimes it gets heated in this place, and recently I said that this Prime Minister was just as irresponsible with money as Justin Trudeau, and I now realize that that was unfair to Justin Trudeau. In reality, he has increased the deficit by almost 70% above what Justin Trudeau left behind. And now the Parliamentary Budget Officer describes this Prime Minister's deficits as alarming, stupefying, unstable, unsustainable. If you don't change, this is done, and something is going to break. How is it even possible for this Prime Minister to be more fiscally incompetent than the drama teacher?
The morning after the showdown, Canada felt different. Newspapers blared with split-screen photos, Carney mid-shout, finger outstretched, Poilievre smirking, arms crossed. It looked less like Parliament and more like a prize fight. Editorials spilled ink analyzing every gesture. The Globe and Mail called it the night Carney found his voice. The National Post argued he had lost his cool and revealed his weakness. Talk radio was ablaze. Callers lined up to vent, some praising Carney for showing passion, others laughing that the polished banker had cracked under pressure. But one thing was certain, no one was ignoring it. Pollsters scrambled to measure the fallout. Early numbers suggested Canadians were split almost down the middle. For some, Carney's fiery defense of his record was proof he could stand up to both Trump abroad and Poilievre at home. For others, Poilievre's relentless attack confirmed he was the fighter ready to replace a tired Liberal government. In homes across the country, ordinary people debated it like a hockey game. He finally stood up for himself, one woman told CBC. No, her neighbor cut in, he shouted because he's scared. Poilievre's under his skin. And in Ottawa, strategists sharpened their knives. The Liberals clipped Carney's arena speech into an ad, painting him as a leader willing to fight for Canadians. The Conservatives doubled down, replaying his raised voice as proof he was rattled, unstable, unfit.
I can't imagine, Mr. Speaker, I can't imagine why it gets heated in the House with language like that.
Yeah, exactly.
The former Prime Minister. This government is conducting a comprehensive spending review. This government is building houses. This government is building projects in the national interest. This government is building Canada strong. Come join us.
For Carney and Poilievre, it wasn't just a parliamentary clash anymore. It was the opening shot of a larger war. Each saw in the other not just an opponent, but an obstacle to their legacy. Poilievre's strategy was clear: frame Carney as a banker out of touch, a man who bends to Trump and collapses under pressure. Carney's counterpunch was equally clear: brand Poilievre as a loudmouth without a plan, a man who tears down but never builds up. The country had chosen sides. The debate wasn't about tariffs or inflation anymore. It was about strength, vision, and identity. And as Canadians scrolled through endless clips of the clash, one truth settled in: this wasn't the last explosion. If this battle was a preview, the next round would be even more explosive. Because for both Carney and Poilievre, the stakes weren't just politics. The stakes were history.
Canada debates.